My name is Katherine Miller, and today should have been the highlight of my academic journey, graduation day. I had been counting down the days for months, pouring sweat and tears into my studies to earn this moment. With each late-night study session and every exam I conquered, I felt proud knowing my family would be there to celebrate my success. Or at least, that's what I hoped. As I put on my graduation gown, a rush of excitement flowed through me. I had double-checked everything, my cap, my regalia, and the carefully crafted speech I was going to deliver. It was the culmination of 8 long years, and I was ready to show everyone my hard work. But as I glanced at my phone, a familiar unease crept in. I had sent countless reminders about today, but in return, all I received were ghostly silence and vague texts hinting at events and distractions that could easily overshadow my big day. It didn't help that Ryan, my younger brother, was throwing a backyard barbecue for his friends today, complete with music, good food, and laughter, the kind of scene I had long imagined would be mine. The thought of my family choosing a party for him over my graduation left a pit in my stomach. I needed them there. I craved their presence. Was my family forgetting the most important day of my life? I took a deep breath, trying to shake off the anxious thoughts. I deserved this moment, and I was determined not to let anything ruin it. As the clock ticked closer to the ceremony, I could feel a rising sense of dread buried beneath the excitement. I made my way to the auditorium, surrounded by fellow graduates brimming with joy and laughter. They shared stories of their families who had traveled from near and far to witness this milestone. I forced a smile as I stood among them, but all I could think about was the empty seats I was beginning to expect. Once inside, I took my place among the graduates, my heart pounding in my chest. My eyes darted around the room, searching for the familiar faces of my parents. I was certain that if they just showed up, everything would instantly feel right again. But each second that passed felt like a lifetime. I felt naked under the scrutiny of the crowd, desperate for a sign that they cared. Finally, Dr. Johnson, the dean of the school, strode onto the stage to begin the ceremony. "Welcome, graduates," he exclaimed, his voice booming through the auditorium. I clapped along with everyone else, my heart in my throat. How could I celebrate without my family watching me walk that stage? The moment I had worked so hard for felt incomplete. As the speakers began to call out names, I felt a storm of emotions brewing inside me. My moment arrived, and I walked up to the stage, the spotlight on me. I took a deep breath, determined to make this a day worth remembering despite everything. But as I looked out into the audience, my smile faded. I spotted a table toward the back where my brother Ryan's friends were gathered, beers in hand, laughing and shouting. I blinked back tears as I imagined my family mingling with them instead of supporting me. The realization hit hard. My parents, and especially my mother, had chosen a barbecue over seeing their daughter reach her dreams. When I finally stepped down from the stage, a fake smile plastered on my face, I was met by applause, but all I could hear were the echoes of my family's absence. The world around me blurred, and I felt disoriented, as if I had just been jettisoned into another reality. A quick glance at my phone revealed nothing but neglect. No message, no call, nothing from anyone I had once relied on for support. The bitterness coursed through me, leaving a trail of pain that felt too deep to ignore. I needed to confront this cold truth. My family had abandoned me on what should have been a triumphant day. With a heavy heart, I made my way to the parking lot after the ceremony, feeling hollow. I didn't just want to disappear, I needed to. That day was supposed to mark the beginning of a new chapter in my life, but the reality I faced was that I was always going to remain in the shadows of my family's attention. What was I to do now? Stay and play the part of a forgotten daughter? or finally let go of the hope that they would ever change. The decision was drawing closer. All I knew was that I wouldn't allow this pain to define me. As I sat in my car, staring out at the bustling streets of Boston, I felt like I was in a fog. The graduation ceremony had ended, but the isolation that engulfed me had just begun. I gripped the steering wheel tightly, willing myself to breathe. My mind raced with the images of the day, the applause, the smiles from my peers, and the overwhelming absence of my family. I was supposed to feel accomplished, but all I felt was emptiness. With every honk of the passing cars, a whisper grew louder inside my head. What are you doing here? Suddenly, memories of late nights spent studying, sleepless hours preparing for exams, and the hopes I had harbored began flashing before my eyes. I had sacrificed so much for this moment, and yet here I was, feeling unseen and unworthy, a ghost in my own life. In that moment of clarity, I realized something. My family had chosen to ignore the significance of my achievements, and I was done allowing their indifference to dictate my worth. I couldn't bear the thought of wallowing in a place that felt more like a cage than a home. I needed to break free, to sever the ties that bound me to a past that didn't acknowledge my existence. With my heart pounding and my mind made up, I grabbed my phone and began scrolling through my contacts. I stopped at Emma Torres's name. She had been a beacon of support throughout my time at university, always encouraging, always believing in me. She was the only voice that resonated with understanding. I shot her a quick message. "I'm leaving. I need to start fresh. Can you help me?" Before I knew it, my decision was solidified. I was heading west, away from Boston and the memories that haunted me. I wanted a clean slate, a chance to reinvent myself and forge a new identity, one that didn't carry the weight of my family's expectations, or lack thereof. And for the first time in what felt like an eternity, I felt a spark of hope. I turned the key in the ignition and my car roared to life. As I pulled out of the parking lot, I could feel the weight lift off my shoulders. My journey ahead was uncertain, but it was mine to shape. I was stepping into the unknown, armed with determination and the promise of newfound independence. I knew deep down that this was just the beginning. The drive to San Francisco felt surreal. With each passing mile, I could feel not just the physical distance from Boston, but an emotional separation from my past. The city loomed closer on the horizon, a vibrant metropolis filled with promise and opportunities that I was finally ready to embrace. My heart raced with excitement, and for the first time, I felt in control of my destiny. When I arrived, the unique charm of San Francisco swept me away. The hilly streets, colorful Victorian houses, and the iconic Golden Gate Bridge seemed to welcome me with open arms. As I settled into my new apartment, tiny but adorned with sunlight streaming through the windows, I took a moment to absorb it all. I was no longer the girl overshadowed by her family. I was Katherine Miller, ready to carve out my own path. I quickly got to work on applying for jobs. My background in tech from college gave me a solid foundation, but it was my determination and newfound voice that truly set me apart. Almost immediately, I landed an interview with a promising startup. During our conversation, I felt empowered. I spoke passionately about my ideas and previous projects, and for the first time in a long time, I felt valued. The next few days flew by as I navigated the whirlwind of job hunting and settling into the city. And then I met Emma Torres for coffee. Just a week earlier, we were only digital friends, but now she was here, supporting me in person. We found a quaint little cafe nestled between tech offices, full of energy and creativity. "Honestly, Kathy, I can't believe you're actually here," she said, her eyes bright with excitement. "You did it! You left and started anew. That's incredible." As we shared our stories over steaming cups of coffee, I opened up about my hopes and fears. Emma listened, never once interrupting, and instead offered encouragement and her own dreams for the future. It felt refreshing to share that space with someone who truly understood. Before long, news hit. I got the job. The company was launching a new tech product that aimed to make life easier for urban dwellers. I couldn't believe my luck. That day marked a turning point in my life, one that signified my commitment to independence and self-growth. As I walked out of my new workplace later that day, I gazed at the bustling city around me. This was mine to explore. I was filled with newfound energy, ready to embrace whatever challenges would come my way. The shadows of my past disappeared further into the distance. For the first time, my heart felt light. I had taken bold steps, closing the chapter on a painful history. And as I embraced this new life, I finally understood that I was the author of my narrative. I was free, and the world awaited my next move. Just as I was settling into my new life in San Francisco, the unexpected began to knock at my door. My job at the startup was exhilarating, and I was fully immersed in the fast-paced world of tech. But even as I flourished professionally, there was an undercurrent of tension brewing beneath the surface. A week into my new role, I came into the office early to prepare for a team meeting. My thoughts were racing with ideas, and I was eager to present my work on the new product launch. As I poured coffee into my cup, I overheard snippets of conversation from colleagues in the break room. They were laughing and reminiscing about their families, telling stories that sounded so familiar, stories I used to belong to. It struck me like a bolt of lightning. Though I had done the hard work to distance myself from my family, in moments like these, it was clear that the echoes of my past still lingered. I thought about my graduation day and the emotional void left by their absence. I had planned to leave everything behind, but the weight of that unresolved pain was still clinging to me. Later that day, as I sat in the meeting room, I realized that I was becoming part of a new family at work, but vulnerability still loomed overhead. Listening to my boss, Tony, and my coworker, David, banter about family gatherings brought my old wounds back to the surface. As the meeting progressed, I tried to focus on the tasks at hand, contributing to discussions about user experience and design specifications, but I felt a nagging thought push into my mind. What would my family think of me now? Were they even aware of my new success? It was frustrating, realizing that despite my best efforts, I was still entangled by their memory. After a particularly intense day, as I walked home through the vibrant streets filled with the delightful chaos of city life, I turned my thoughts toward Emma. She had been my solid anchor, always encouraging me to push through the tough times. I decided to call her, hoping to gain some clarity and strength. "Hey, Kathy, how's everything going?" Emma said, her voice lighting up the line. "It's been good, but—" I hesitated. "I keep having these moments where I flash back to my family, and it just hits hard. I thought I was moving on, but I still feel this pull." "It's completely normal," she assured me. "Starting fresh doesn't erase the past. It's about learning how to let it shape you while you build a new narrative." Her words resonated with me, and for the first time, I felt understood. I needed to confront these feelings, not shy away from them. Acknowledging my past was part of truly moving forward. As I ended the call, I felt somewhat liberated. I realized my past experiences had made me who I was now, giving me strength and wisdom. I didn't need to forget or erase, I just had to accept. The next morning, with renewed determination, I approached the day ready to take on both challenges and shadows alike. I was ready to earn my place in my new world. A few weeks flew by as my footing in San Francisco grew steadier. I had developed a solid routine at work, forged friendships with Emma, and was making strides toward my goals. Still, a nagging feeling lingered, a sense that perhaps I was evading an important part of my journey, the unresolved pain with my family. Then came the news that prompted me to confront that pain head on. My grandmother, the one person in my family who always saw me, had passed away. The funeral was scheduled in Boston, and despite all my efforts to distance myself from my past, the gravity of that moment pulled me back into its orbit. As the day approached, I found myself in a whirlpool of emotions. My heart ached with sadness for the loss, but it also fluttered with anxiety about facing the family I had tried so hard to escape. Part of me wanted to attend the funeral, to share my grief with others. The other part was terrified of being reminded of the hurtful moments that led me to leave in the first place. On the day of the funeral, I stood in front of the mirror in my modest San Francisco apartment, running my fingers over the fabric of my black dress. This wasn't just any family gathering. It was the first time I'd returned to the place where I once felt so invisible. The thought made my stomach churn. Would they even recognize me as the person I'd become? As I arrived in Boston, the familiar sights tugged at my heartstrings. The old family home stood there just as I had left it, sturdy and unchanged, while I felt like a completely different person. My breath caught in my throat as I stepped inside. The air was thick with nostalgia and unspoken tension. The funeral itself was brief, solemn, and filled with whispers of remembrance. I spotted my mom, Linda, across the room, exchanging pleasantries with relatives. A wave of anxiety swept over me. There she was, my mother, the woman who had never shown up when it mattered most. I couldn't help but wonder what she thought of the daughter she had neglected. After the service, the family gathered at the house for a small reception. I felt their eyes on me as I entered, judging, assessing. Ryan was there too, but I couldn't muster the courage to approach him. Instead, I hovered on the outskirts, sipping a drink, lost in the cacophony of family chatter. Just as I thought I could slip away unnoticed, my mother noticed me. Her expression shifted, a mix of shock and something I couldn't quite place. Relief, perhaps? "Kathy," she said, drawing closer. "You made it." I could sense the tension pulsing between us, but I busied myself with the room, focusing on what to say next. But then came the confrontation everyone had been avoiding. "Why didn't you come to my graduation?" The words spilled out before I could stop them. My voice was steady, but my heart raced. Was it really more important to celebrate Ryan's barbecue? The silence that followed was deafening. Conversation ceased, and eyes turned towards us. I could feel their anticipation, but I was determined to voice the hurt that had simmered for far too long. I wasn't going to let this moment slip away. "Mom, that day was monumental for me. Instead, I was left in a room filled with strangers while you partied for someone else. Did you even care?" The words hung heavy in the air, and I could see the shift in my family's expressions. Shock, discomfort, and perhaps a hint of regret. This was it. The moment that could either lead to understanding or an even wider chasm. I held my breath, waiting for her response. I was prepared for a fight, or maybe even worse, for her to dismiss my feelings entirely. What happened next could change everything. The silence hung thick in the air, and I could feel the weight of everyone's gaze. For a fleeting moment, I wondered if I had gone too far. But as I looked into my mother's eyes, I saw a mix of shock and fear. This was a confrontation I had always imagined, but now that it was happening, I felt a rush of adrenaline and determination. "Did you even care?" I repeated, more softly now, my voice trembling slightly. "Not just about graduation, but about me. Did you ever think about what it felt like to be overlooked, to always be the one in the background waiting for acknowledgement?" Linda's face twisted into a frown, a blend of confusion and defensiveness. "Kathy, I know," I interrupted, my heart pounding. "This isn't about excuses. You can't just dismiss me or my feelings like you always have. I needed you. I still do. That day was supposed to be about me, and you chose to ignore it." I felt a fire igniting inside me, fueled by years of frustration and resentment. I had navigated my path to independence only to find that my family was still a looming presence in my life. It was time to stop allowing their actions to dictate my emotions. The room was silent, except for the soft shuffles of family members shifting uneasily. I could see Ryan watching us, his expression a mixture of concern and contemplation. This moment wasn't just for me. It was for every silent scream I had swallowed over the years. I packed up my life and left for San Francisco because I couldn't bear the thought of living in your shadow anymore. And while I'm starting fresh, a part of me is still broken because I wanted my family to celebrate that journey with me. Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes, but I forced them back. I didn't want pity. I wanted understanding. But now I'm realizing that I can't keep holding on to the hope that things will change. You've shown me time and time again that you value others more than me, and it hurts. It's beyond painful. My mother opened her mouth, but no words came out. She looked around the room as if searching for support from the other family members. Shouldn't she be the one comforting me? Finally, she found her voice. Kathy, I never meant to hurt you. I thought you were happy doing your own thing. I thought graduation would just be another day. Just another day? I exclaimed, the heat rising. For me, it was the culmination of years of hard work and sacrifice. But it's clear that I will never be enough for you. My achievements mean nothing if you can't even bother to remember when they are. At that moment, I realized I wouldn't find what I had once hoped for, reconciliation or even acknowledgement from my family. Instead, I was faced with the hard truth that I had to let go of this chapter for good. With a deep breath, I leaned back, resisting the urge to plead or argue further. I'm done fighting for your attention. I'm moving on, with or without you. I don't want to continue this charade. I turned to leave, a mix of sorrow and relief washing over me. As I walked to the door, I could feel all eyes still on me. But this time, it didn't disturb me. I was reclaiming my narrative. Goodbye, Mom, I said softly, the finality of my words reverberating in my chest. I hope one day you understand. Stepping outside into the fresh air, I realized that I had freed myself from the bindings of resentment and disappointment. I was ready to step into my future, unburdened and unapologetic. San Francisco awaited me with open arms, and I was determined to find my place in the world, a place where I would finally be valued for who I am. The morning of graduation started like something out of the life I thought I was living. I lined up my makeup on the bathroom counter, rehearsed my smile in the mirror, and checked my phone for the 10th time. No new messages, just the last one from my mom the night before. We're so busy getting everything ready for today. Don't stress, okay? She'd added a smiling emoji and a little heart. She didn't say what everything was. She didn't ask how I felt. I filled in the rest of the sentence myself, getting everything ready for my big day. That was the only thing that made sense. Outside the venue, clusters of families formed around the steps, holding bouquets and handmade signs. I stood off to the side, clutching the edge of my gown, refreshing my messages again and again, like somehow the act of looking harder might make her appear. Nothing. I typed, "Where are you guys sitting?" Then hovered over the send button. I deleted it. I didn't want to sound needy. I told myself they were probably stuck in traffic, maybe parking was a nightmare, maybe they were already inside and just hadn't checked their phones. How do you admit to yourself that the people you love might simply have chosen not to come? Inside the auditorium, I scanned the rows of seats while the dean welcomed everyone. I tried to match every empty chair with a story that wasn't mine. Maybe they were in the restroom, maybe they were late. But when the speeches dragged on and the seats where my family should have been stayed empty, denial started to taste like poison. Then my phone buzzed in my pocket. I palmed it under the folds of my gown and glanced down. A photo from my aunt's social media popped up on my lock screen, tagging my mom. My brother stood in the center of their backyard, a plastic "Congrats, grad" banner behind him. He wasn't graduating from anything. It was just a party. My mom stood beside him, laughing as she held up a plate stacked with food. The timestamp on the picture matched the exact moment I was supposed to walk across the stage. I stared at the screen until my name was called. Walking across that stage, the applause sounded distant, muffled by the roaring question in my head. If this isn't enough for her, what will ever be? I shook hands, forced a smile for the camera, and walked back to my seat, holding a diploma that suddenly felt like a receipt for a deal that only I had honored. After the ceremony, the crowd spilled onto the lawn. Parents wrapped their arms around their kids, friends hugged, cried, posed for pictures. I stood alone at the edge of it all, clutching my diploma case like a shield. I called my mom, straight to voicemail. I called again. This time, someone picked up, but all I heard was music and laughter. "Huh? Hold on, everyone. I need a picture of the guest of honor," my mom's voice said, distant but clear. It wasn't me. I hung up before she realized she'd answered. For a few seconds, I just stared at my reflection in the black screen of my phone. My lipstick had cracked in the corners from smiling too hard. Was I really going to keep pretending this was normal? That I was okay with being the backup child, the flexible one, the one who always understood? On the drive back to my tiny off-campus apartment, the anger settled into something colder. Clarity.
If I stayed, I'd keep orbiting around people who barely noticed when I crossed milestones alone. If I left, at least the silence would be honest. By the time I parked, the plan had started forming. Not a dramatic movie-style escape, something sharper, more intentional. First, I opened the family group chat and scrolled through years of messages about Ryan's games, Ryan's promotions, Ryan's big opportunities, with my accomplishments squeezed into the gaps like afterthoughts. I hovered over the Leave Conversation button, then closed the app. Walking away had to mean more than just a thumb-pressing leave. It had to mean dismantling the version of myself they thought they owned. I pulled out my laptop and wrote a list. Close out the lease. Transfer savings. Apply to jobs far away, really far away. Find somewhere new to land. Remove them from everything. Emergency contacts? Nah. I stared at the list. A familiar name floated into my mind. Emma Torres, the one person who'd always treated my achievements like they actually mattered, the friend who had stayed up with me on video calls during finals week, who told me I was worth more than the scraps of attention I got at home. I messaged her. I'm serious this time. I'm done. I need a clean break. Is San Francisco still as far away as it sounds? Her reply came within a minute. Yes, and you have a couch here until you find something better. If you're really doing this, we'll make it work. I looked around my apartment. The stacks of textbooks, the cheap furniture, the photo frame on my desk holding the last picture of my family all together. My mom's smile in that photo suddenly looked fake, like it belonged to a stranger. That night, I packed what I could fit in my car, slid my key under my landlord's door with a short note, and stared at my phone one last time. There were still no messages from my mother asking how graduation had gone, so I sent her my own message. A single photo of me in my cap and gown, standing alone in the empty auditorium after everyone had left. No caption, no explanation, just the truth she didn't bother to witness. Then I muted her number, placed the phone face down on the passenger seat, and turned the key in the ignition. Was I running away or finally walking out of a role I was never meant to play? The miles blurred together as I drove west, my old life shrinking in the rearview mirror. Every state line I crossed felt like another invisible cord snapping, another tie to my mother loosening. By the time I reached San Francisco, exhaustion clung to me like a second skin, but underneath it was something new. Relief. Emma met me in front of her apartment building, barefoot and mismatched socks, arms open wide. "You actually did it," she said, pulling me into a hug that lasted a beat longer than casual. "You really left." What was I supposed to do? Wait around for her to remember I exist? Emma didn't argue. She didn't try to defend my mother or remind me that family is everything. She just helped me carry my boxes up the narrow stairs and cleared a corner in her living room for my suitcase and folded clothes. The first week was a haze of logistics. I applied for jobs during the day, sent out my resume to every tech company that would take a chance on a fresh grad, and spent the evenings rewriting my life on paper. Emergency contact? Emma Torres. Next of kin? N.A. Permanent address? San Francisco, California. Every form that used to have my mother's name on it became a small ritual of erasure. My pen hovered over the boxes where I used to write Linda Miller, and I crossed them out with a kind of quiet satisfaction. If she wasn't going to show up when I needed her, she didn't get to be the person the hospital called if I ended up in a ditch. It took 3 weeks of interviews, rejections, and waiting, but eventually I got an offer from a mid-sized startup building tools for urban planning. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. When the recruiter called to say, "We'd like to bring you on board," I almost asked if she had the right person. At the office, introductions came with the same small talk. "Where are you from? What brought you here? Do you miss your family?" I'm from Boston. I needed a change. It's complicated back home. Most people nodded and let it go. A few pushed, but I'd perfected the art of the polite deflection. How do you explain that your mother abandoned you on your graduation day without sounding like you're exaggerating?
At night, I sat on Emma's couch scrolling through my photos. I started deleting. First went the easy ones, blurry selfies, duplicate shots, random screenshots. Then I went after the images that hurt. My mom hugging Ryan at his birthday while I stood in the background. My mom cheering at his games. My mom smiling in the front row of his events. While my photos from award ceremonies were selfies in bathroom mirrors because no one was there to take them. One by one, I removed them from my phone, from my cloud, from my social media. I didn't rage delete. I curated. I left evidence of my life, my projects, my late-night coffee runs during finals, my new city. I erased her, not because I wanted to pretend she'd never existed, but because I refused to keep preserving a version of her that had never truly shown up for me. Sometimes I'd stop with my finger hovering over the delete button and ask myself, if I erase this, am I lying about what happened, or finally telling the truth about what mattered? I kept one photo, my grandmother and me standing on her porch, her arm looped through mine. She was the only person who had ever looked at me like I was enough, exactly as I was. I slid that photo into the corner of my mirror. San Francisco slowly became a life, a keycard that actually opened doors, meetings where people listened when I spoke, pizza nights with Emma and a few coworkers, mornings where I woke up and didn't immediately check my phone to see if my mom remembered I existed. But even as I built that life, there was a quiet awareness humming in the background. I had disappeared from her world, but the part of me that wanted her to notice the empty space where I used to stand, that part was still very much alive. The email from the lawyer came on a Tuesday afternoon, halfway through a product sprint. The subject line was short and formal. Estate of Margaret Hayes, my grandmother's name. My stomach dropped. I hadn't spoken to her in months. I'd told myself I was protecting her from the fallout of my disappearing act, but deep down, I'd been afraid she'd take my mother's side, afraid she'd tell me to go back and be reasonable. I clicked the email open with fingers that suddenly felt heavy. The lawyer explained that my grandmother had passed away peacefully 2 weeks earlier. There would be a small service in Boston. Attached were scanned copies of relevant documents, including a note my grandmother had left for me, and information about a fund she'd set up years ago. I opened the attachment. She had directed a portion of her savings into an education account for Katherine's tuition and graduation expenses. She'd written my name out in her careful, looping handwriting. The fund had been under my mother's control until Katherine completes her degree. According to the statement, most of the money was gone. The withdrawals were marked with dates that lined up suspiciously well with my brother's emergency expenses. Car repairs, a failed business venture, a trip he had to take with his friends. My throat went dry. I scrolled further and found a note from my grandmother to the lawyer, written months before graduation. She mentioned being relieved that Linda said Katherine didn't want a big fuss over her ceremony and preferred a small family dinner later. My vision blurred. My mother hadn't just skipped my graduation, she'd rewritten the story so completely that even my grandmother thought I didn't want anyone there. She'd used the money meant to support my education to fund my brother's life, and then acted like my graduation was just another Tuesday. How many times had she done that? How many moments had she quietly edited, replacing my needs with someone else's while telling everyone I wasn't the type to make a big deal out of things? I closed my laptop and pressed my palms into my eyes until I saw sparks. When Eva came home that night, she found me sitting at the kitchen table, surrounded by printed pages. "What happened?" she asked, dropping her bag and sitting across from me. I slid the documents toward her. She told my grandmother I didn't want them at graduation. She used the money Grandma left for me, for my degree, for Ryan, and then she threw him a party the same day I walked across the stage alone. Emma read in silence, her jaw tightening. What do you even call that? Neglect? Manipulation? Theft? How do you take your own child's moment and hand it to someone else and then sleep at night like nothing happened? Emma met my gaze. What do you want to do? For the first time, my answer wasn't a shaky, I don't know. I want her to feel what she made me feel, I said quietly. I want her to wake up one day and realize she has no idea who her daughter is anymore because she was so busy rewriting my life to fit her story. And I want everyone she lied to see the truth. I'm done being the version of me she edits to make herself look better. I booked a flight to Boston for the funeral, not to reconnect, not to patch things up. I was going back to bury my grandmother and to bury whatever remained of the daughter my mother thought she could control. The day of the funeral, Boston felt smaller than I remembered, like the city itself was shrinking around me. I stood at the edge of the cemetery, clutching the program with my grandmother's name on it, and reminded myself why I was there. I wasn't there for my mother, not anymore. The service was simple and quiet, just like my grandmother would have wanted. I caught sight of my mom across the crowd, her eyes red, her hand gripping the arm of a chair. For a moment, a reflexive ache flared in my chest, the urge to go to her, to be the daughter who fixed things and made it easier for everyone else. Then I remembered the empty seats at my graduation and the backyard party photos stamped with that cruel little "Congrats" banner. After the burial, everyone moved to my grandmother's house for the reception. The living room was crowded with relatives holding paper plates and half-empty cups, trading stories about how strong my mother had been through everything. She's had such a tough year, one aunt said. Between Ryan's setbacks and Katherine going wherever she went, Linda told us Kathy didn't even want a ceremony. Can you imagine? My ears rang. I stepped into the doorway. That's not what happened, I said. Heads turned, conversations stopped. My mother froze, her smile slipping for the first time all day. Kathy, she said, her voice tight, this really isn't the time. Isn't it? I asked. Grandma spent years saving for my education and my graduation. She trusted you to handle that money. She thought you were supporting me. She thought I didn't want anyone at my ceremony because you told her that. A murmur rolled through the room. My aunt's eyes widened. My mother's face went pale. You're misinterpreting. I pulled the printed documents from my bag and placed them on the coffee table. These are Grandma's instructions, and these, I said, flipping to the statements, are the withdrawals you made on the same dates you posted photos from Ryan's emergency trips and parties. I reached for the remote and turned on the TV. I'd synced my phone to it earlier, just in case I found the courage to do exactly this. On the screen, a slideshow started. A photo of me in my gown on the empty stage, followed by the backyard barbecue shots from that same afternoon, my mom posing next to Ryan, laughing under the banner. I didn't add music. The silence was loud enough. While I was walking across that stage alone, I said, this is what my mother was doing, and she told Grandma I didn't want her there. She told all of you that too, didn't she? I let the question hang. My uncle cleared his throat. Linda, is that true? My mother opened her mouth, closed it, and then forced a laugh that sounded brittle. This is ridiculous. You know how dramatic Kathy can be. She left. She didn't even tell us she was going to San Francisco. What were we supposed to do? Show up. That's what parents do. And if you couldn't, you could have told the truth instead of turning me into the ungrateful daughter who didn't want to fuss. I turned to the room, not just to her. I disappeared because staying meant letting her keep rewriting my life, using my story as a prop for hers. So I erased her from everything, papers, forms, photos, because she erased me first. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Ryan shifted uncomfortably, avoiding my eyes. My aunt looked down at the documents again, her lips pressed into a thin line. I could see it sinking in. The money, the lies, the gap between the mother my family thought they knew and the one who'd quietly chosen a party over her daughter's graduation. My mother's voice cracked. You don't understand what it's like to hold everything together. I did what I had to do for this family. Did you? I asked. Or did you just do what made you feel important? Because here's what I'm doing for myself now. I pulled a slim folder from my bag and opened it. These are the forms removing you as my emergency contact, as my beneficiary, as my point of contact for anything involving my life. I've already filed the paperwork in San Francisco to change my last name to Grandma's maiden name. After today, legally and emotionally, we are done. A few people gasped. Someone dropped a plastic cup. Is this revenge? I asked quietly, more to the room than to her. Maybe, but it's also protection. I'm not going to keep bleeding for someone who calls my dreams just another day. My mother stared at me, her expression crumpling in slow motion. I could see it in her eyes the moment she realized I wasn't bluffing, that there would be no late-night phone call where I apologized for overreacting, no quiet return with my tail tucked between my legs. I was already gone. This was just the part where I made her watch. Without another word, I turned off the TV, gathered my folder, and walked toward the door. The hallway seemed longer than I remembered, lined with framed photos of birthdays and holidays. I noticed how few of them I was actually in. At the threshold, I stopped and looked back one last time. Goodbye, Mom, I said. I hope someday, when you're wondering why your daughter doesn't call, you remember that you were the one who taught me how to disappear. Then I stepped outside, closing the door behind me on the life I'd finally decided to erase. Back in San Francisco, everything looked the same. Same bus stop, same corner coffee shop, same dent in Emma's couch cushion where I always sat. But I was different. The funeral, the confrontation, the slideshow, it all replayed in my mind like a movie I'd finally reached the end of. For the first time, there wasn't a scene I wished I'd handled differently. I had said what needed to be said. I had shown what needed to be seen. Now it was about follow-through. The name change paperwork took months to process, but the act of filing it felt like flipping a switch. I signed the forms with a steady hand. Katherine Hayes, my grandmother's last name. The first time I saw it printed on an official document, a strange mix of grief and pride washed over me. At the bank, I updated my records. Any family members you'd like to add as beneficiaries? No, I said, not right now. At the doctor's office, I filled out a new intake form. In case of emergency, notify, I wrote Emma's name again, then added the name of a colleague who had quietly become a friend. The line that used to say mother stayed blank. I went through my phone, removing my mother's number from everything, my rideshare account, my HR file, my list of trusted contacts. I changed my email, set filters to send anything from her directly to a folder I labeled Archive, and then muted notifications for that folder completely. Erasing her wasn't a single dramatic gesture. It was a series of small, deliberate choices, name by name, form by form, memory by memory. One night, Emma found me sitting on the floor, surrounded by shoe boxes of old photos and notebooks. "You sure you're okay?" she asked, leaning on the doorframe. "I'm not burning anything," I said. "I'm just sorting." I made 2 piles. Pile 1, moments that still felt like mine. Laughing with friends, school projects, the time Grandma and I baked a cake so badly it collapsed in the middle and we ate it straight from the pan. Pile 2, moments that only reminded me of being an accessory in my own life, standing behind Ryan in family photos, sitting off to the side while my mother poured herself into his latest crisis. I put the second pile back into the shoebox, taped it shut, and slid it to the back of my closet. Not destroyed, just out of reach. Do you ever worry you're going to regret this? Emma asked quietly. Every day, I admitted. But I also regret every time I waited for her to change. At some point, you have to decide which regret you can live with. Weeks turned into months. Life, real, ordinary, complicated life, started to fill the spaces that anger used to occupy. Work got busier, I led my first project, I laughed more easily. Sometimes I even went a whole day without thinking about my mother at all. And then one afternoon, an email slipped past my filters. The subject line was just my name. I stared at it for a long time before opening it. It was from my mother. No greeting, no apologies, just a few lines. She said she'd heard about the name change. She said the family was concerned about me. She said she hoped I would come to my senses and remember where I belong. I read it twice, waiting for the old guilt to flare up, for the urge to fix everything to pull me back in. It didn't. Instead, I thought about that empty row of seats on my graduation day, about the photo of her laughing over a grill while I crossed the stage alone, about my grandmother's careful handwriting on those documents, and the trust my mother had treated like an ATM. I hit reply and typed one sentence. I remember exactly where I belong, and it isn't where I'm treated like I don't exist. Then I deleted the draft instead of sending it. Some messages don't need to be delivered to be true. I archived her email, re-enabled the filter, and went back to my work. People like to say revenge is about hurting someone the way they hurt you. Maybe that's true for some. For me, it was about making sure my mother had to live with the silence she created, without the comfort of pretending it was my choice all along. I didn't send dramatic ultimatums. I didn't show up on holidays to argue. I simply stopped being available for her version of the story. I changed my name, my contacts, my future. I erased every official trace of the daughter she hadn't bothered to show up for, and in doing so, I finally saw myself clearly. Sometimes late at night, I catch myself wondering what she tells people now. Does she say I'm busy, that we grew apart, that I'm going through a phase? Then I remember, I don't have to know. Her narrative doesn't rule me anymore. I still have scars from the girl who stood on that stage, searching for a face that never appeared. But I also have something she never gave me. A life where my worth isn't measured by how convenient I am to someone else. If you were in my place, if your mother abandoned you on the day you finally earned your moment, would you keep waiting in that auditorium for her to show up? Or would you walk out, close the doors behind you, and start erasing her from a story she never truly cared to be part of?